This is quite possibly the most important video that I've ever done. Stay tuned.
Bry's Comics.
In this video, we're going to talk about ghost numbers on the CGC Census, a subject that has a real impact on this community, and there's a solution. There's been a lot of misinformation that has gone out in the past, and in this video, we're going to break down all the important points, why it matters, what can be done about it, the solution, and how we can proceed moving forward. But if you're new here, we always do a monthly giveaway on my YouTube channel. If you subscribe to the channel, comment on this video, and like this video, you're entered to win 2 CGC slabs, Secret Wars #1 in a 9.8 cover A by Alex Ross, and the 1 in 25 Ribic variant. And if you head over to bryscomics.com and sign up for the newsletter over there, we also do a monthly giveaway. This month it's 2 free slabs, Secret Wars #2, the first full appearance of God Emperor Doom, and the 1 in 25 Ribic variant for issue #2. And if you follow me over on Instagram, I do trades for grails and other fresh content over there. I currently have an X-Men #1 and a 4.0 available for trade. I'm filming this in advance, so I'm not sure if that's still available or not. And then also follow me over on Whatnot. We just auctioned off a giant size X-Men #1 starting at $1, and I'm going live usually 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 10 a.m. over on Whatnot. Link down in the description to get $10 off towards your first purchase. So what are ghost numbers on the CGC Census? A ghost number is when the same book is accounted for more than one time on the census. And how this happens is a lot of times you'll get a book back from CGC, or you'll buy a book in the wild or at a con, or somehow acquire a CGC slab. Notice that there's pressable, improvable defects in the book, decide to crack that book out and send it back into CGC to be graded again, but you don't send in that original label with it. So now there's 2 entries on the census for the same book, and you can kick this can as far down the road as you want. The same book can be submitted as many times as somebody desires to do so. And each time that they don't return the label with the book, or after they even submit the book, then there's ghost entries on the census. And over time, what this has done is it has inflated the CGC Census. And for the longest time, I thought that there was nothing that could be done about this, but I have new information that has changed that point of view. And it was years ago when I first started doing CPR, I reached out to CGC and said, if I return this book with the label, will you update the census? And they said, no. The only way we will update the census is if we crack the book out ourselves. And so I thought, well, man, that really sucks. You know, that puts us all in a rock and a hard place. I mean, we're not going to all submit our books to CGC to be pressed and cleaned. That's not reasonable. But I decided recently that I wanted to do a video about this, and I wanted to do more research. So I looked on the CGC forums, and there's CGC facilitators responding to questions saying, yes, you can resubmit the labels. Just send them in to us. You don't need to send it with the book. Just send us the labels. We'll update the census. And I said, what? This is opposite from what I was told. So I called CGC again, talked to customer service again, and said, hey, if I send you a bunch of labels, will you update the census? And they said yes. So I was just simply given misinformation in the first place. So this is really good news, though, for everyone, because it's as simple as just sending in your labels to CGC and they will update the census. Now, the biggest hesitation for most people is there was misinformation before where people thought you had to resubmit it with the book. So say, for instance, you cracked out a 5.0 and you were hoping to get like a 7.0. Well, people were hesitant to send in the label with that book that has been pressed, cleaned, and improved because they don't want the grader to be influenced at all by the past grade and say like some point of pride, like, well, if we graded it a 5.0 before, we're going to grade it a 5.0 again. There was that hesitation, which is completely understandable. And the solution to that is you don't have to send it in with the book. Just collect your CGC old labels, save them up, pile them up, and send them all in at once. For the price of a postage stamp, you can solve this problem of inflated numbers on the census. So if you have a bunch of old labels sitting around, please send them back to CGC so they can update the census. It's really important to have the census as accurate as possible. I'm a data guy. I'm a data nerd. I'm all about data, sales data, census numbers, and the 2 things that are the most important for the values of comic books are the relative rarity and the recent sales. So the census and sales data combined together is the information that we use to value comic books. And in some cases, it can make a big difference if the census is skewed in a certain way. For example, say you have like a book that's like a 9.6, and maybe you have the only 9.6. And if you send it in 2-3 times because you're hoping to get that 9.6, 9.8, but you don't send in the old label, now that single 9.6 on the census will show that there's 3 or 4 copies. So you've shot yourself in the foot because now it shows that there's 4 copies in the world when really you have the only one. And that's the most extreme example, but the more common example is just like a run-of-the-mill book or something that has a lot of books on the census, like Ultimate Fallout number 4. Over time, the accumulative total of old labels that aren't sent back in, inflate the census. Now, how much do they inflate the census? That's debatable. Nobody knows for sure because nobody knows how many people have done this and not sent in the label. But let's just say, for example, worst case scenario, about 25% of the books on the census are inflated. I don't think it's anywhere near that high personally. It's probably different for different books. I don't think it's anywhere near 25% because of the time and effort that it takes to actually crack press and resubmit a book. I think the vast majority of collectors would never even consider doing it. For example, I went to a local comic shop years ago now, and the guy pulled out, he said, check this out. And he pulled out 2 CGC books that were in the wrong case, right? So he sent these books in together. One of them was like a Silver Age X-Men, and one of them was a modern book, and the labels were flipped. And I thought, and the thing that was crazy about it was they were in old CGC case. So this guy has had these for like 5 or 10 years at the time. And I thought, well, why didn't you send that back to get fixed? I mean, you can't sell it. It's great. The grade was wrong too. It was just, the book was flipped. It was a simple mistake, simple fix. You send it in, they re-encapsulate it and fix the labels. But he didn't want to do that because of how much work was involved in resubmitting something to CGC. And that's just an example to show that most people, the vast majority of collectors, would never do CPR. The vast majority of collectors don't even resubmit things to CGC for mechanical errors. If books come back with scratches or debris in the case or flipped labels, the vast majority of people don't send them back in. I know because I buy a lot of collections that come through my shop, and I see books in collections with swapped labels or debris in the case or scratches all over it. And the reason they didn't do it is because of how much of a hassle it is to resubmit books. So I don't think it's anywhere near 25%, but just to say, for argument's sake, let's say 25% of the books for Ultimate Fallout 4 on the census are ghost numbers. Well, let's say there's 14,000 total copies on the census for Ultimate Fallout 4, and let's say, so 25% of those are ghost numbers. That would mean the real number of books is 10,500. Does it really make a difference if there's 10,500 total copies of Ultimate Fallout 4 versus 14,000 total copies of Ultimate Fallout 4? They're both big numbers. They're both high numbers. And I don't think that number alone is going to influence the price that you're willing to pay for Ultimate Fallout 4. I think you're more concerned about how many copies are available and what was the most recent sales and what are they selling for at the time. So the reason that I say that, because as I mentioned before, I am a data guy. Everything, having the data correctly is very important to me, but don't let perfect be the enemy of good, okay? Don't let perfect be the enemy of good. No, the CGC Census is not perfect, but it is good. It is good enough for us to make informed decisions about comic book purchase. And we can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. We can't say, the census is trash because there's inflated numbers. No, there are inflated numbers, but it's still good enough to make informed decisions. And my suggestion for what to do to, counteract this is just consider that when you make your purchases. When you look at the census, just consider that, yes, there are ghost numbers on there. It is inflated because the problem is the train has left the station, or whatever the phrase is. The damage is done for a lot of books for all of these years because misinformation has been out there that CGC wouldn't update the census, or that people had to submit them with the original book and that it would affect the grade. All of that misinformation, confusing stuff. And then you add on to it people that just didn't know about this, right? So going forward, it is important that all of us, especially if you're doing CPR, that you yourself resubmit the labels. But even if you don't do CPR, if you're in this hobby and you see a post, say it's on social media and you see a post where somebody posts a book with the old label and the book's cracked out to show their grade bump, gently remind that person, hey, just so you know, you should resubmit that label so that the census is updated. updated. Don't be a dick about it. Don't be a grump about it. Don't go, oh, there's another ghost number on the census. That's not doing any good for this hobby, okay? It's possible that that person doesn't even know about ghost numbers. That person you didn't even consider that fact. And it's also highly possible that that person wanted to get this social media post showing the grade bump that they got. I totally understand that. I think that's valid and reasonable, that if you're going to do all this work to CPR a book, you want to get a social media post to show your success. So get that post, get that picture, and then send the label back. You don't need to hold the label forever. You don't need to keep the two together forever, okay? The numbers on the census are more important than, you keeping those two labels together. So I think the biggest people, obviously, that are going to have the biggest impact on this are comic book pressers and cleaners, all right? There's a lot of people offering pressing and cleaning services now, and if you're watching this video and you do this, I just wanted to gently remind you, please send those labels back in because, nobody benefits from an inflated census. Nobody. Everybody would benefit from more accurate numbers on the census, and you can send them in separately from the books that you've cracked out, so you don't have to worry about them impacting the grading of the book for resubmission, and you can send them in with another submission. If you're pressing and cleaning books, you're probably submitting all the time. Just throw them in an envelope with a little note that says, hey, I cracked these out. Please take them off the census. And it won't cost you anything extra to send those back to CGC. So to sum everything up, the relative rarity of collectibles is one of the most important factors to the value of that collectible. So if you want your collectibles to be worth the most money, you need to be a pioneer for this issue and just gently remind people to send back their labels. You yourself send back their labels. And over time, if we just get in the habit of doing this as a community, if it becomes a thing that people actually agree that this is important, then going forward, we have the potential to have a much better census, all right? If we just continue on the path that we're on, where we're not resubmitting the labels that come or there's misinformation about it, the census numbers could be a real problem 10 or 20 years down the road. And I, for one, plan to be in this hobby until the day I die. So it's important for me, and I feel honored and fortunate to have a platform that might actually impact this, because I want the census to be usable in 10 or 20 years. But if it gets out of hand, it has potential to snowball and become a much bigger problem in the future. So yes, the damage is done for a lot of books up until this point, but I think it's soon enough where we can stop the bleeding, and going forward, we can have a very accurate census that's good enough for us to be confident with going forward. And it's going to take all of us as a community to get on board and agree that this is an important issue. So thank you so much for sticking with me all the way to the end. Don't forget to subscribe, comment, and like this video for your chance to win 2 slabs, and sign up for that newsletter at brycecomics.com for first access to new collections. I got a new collection coming in this week, I believe, by the time you're watching this. They're starting to go really fast, so it pays to be subscribed to that newsletter and get first dibs on these things, because when I put things on the site, I put them at below FMV and you get 10% off. So they fly off the shelves, and that's just how I want to do business. So you definitely want to be subscribed to that newsletter if buying books at a decent price is something that interests you. Also, we're having a ton of fun over on Whatnot. Even if you don't buy books, come hang out. It's about the experience as well, and I gotta say, I'm really pleased with the experience. It takes this part of the social media aspect of collecting to a different level to be able to communicate and go back and forth, because I don't get to do that a lot here on these videos. So check me out on Whatnot. Thank you as always, and we'll catch you in the next one. Bye.
Bryce Comics.